It's aluminum, barium, and silver iodide is the primary chemicals that are used.
Chemtrails. That's the term that the conspiracy theorists are coined with.
Hallelujah and praise Jesus. Senator Garcia said this is a spicy bill. This chemtrail, geoengineering, and weather modification bill passed the Florida Senate with flying colors, 6-3. Gee, I was always told chemtrails were just contrail water vapors. If that's the case, why is there now a freaking bill that's about to go to Governor DeSantis' desk to sign into law, prohibiting weather modification? You've been lied to, and the ones who've lied about this is complicit and part of the cover-up, period. So now you can sit down and shut the hell up. Thank God for Senator Garcia. Thank you for your service on this vital issue to our health and planet. And please keep in mind that this bill now allows citizens to call into the Department of Environmental Protection online, by phone, mail, or email. So that's also great news. In case you aren't aware, now that this bill has passed the Senate, it will now be sent to Governor DeSantis' office in Florida so he can sign the bill, and it will become state law that can be enforced within state boundaries. Now, if DeSantis flops on this bill, there's going to be a ton of pissed Floridians. I screen recorded the entire 45-minute segment of Senator Garcia when she spoke during the meeting with the experts at the end as well. And I'm just going to showcase the most important areas in the meeting that you must see, and to save time. Stay with me because it gets good towards the end once some experts come forward. As Senator Garcia said, this is a spicy bill.
Now we'll take up tab number 3, Senate Bill 56 on weather modification activities by Senator Garcia. You are recognized to explain your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That previous one was a sweet one. This one's a spicy one.
Oh,
So,
okay.
to
Let's
say the
go.
least.
She began with explaining what this bill is about, including chemicals used and reflecting sunlight.
So, SB 56 introduces comprehensive measures to address weather modification within the state of Florida. So the bill basically prohibits the injection, release, or dispersion by any means of any chemical compound, substance, or any apparatus into the atmosphere for the purpose of affecting the temperature, the weather, or the intensity of the sunlight.
Then she goes on to speak about the geoengineering aspect of the chemtrail nonsense.
Also, the bill introduces a new term called geoengineering to weather modification, which is a range of techniques that are aimed at manipulating Earth's climate systems to modify, precipitate, or mitigate the impacts of rising global temperatures.
And let's not forget about cloud seeding to increase rain.
Weather modification, such as cloud seeding, involves altering local or regional atmospheric conditions to increase precipitation or reduce hailstorms.
Reducing the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth.
Geoengineering, such as solar radiation modification, focuses on larger scale actions to reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth.
And she also adds an amendment which increases the fines for violations from $10,000 to $100,000. Now, I mentioned in my last video that she did need to increase this fine, so this is just amazing that she did exactly that.
Madam Chair, the bill does have an amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the amendment increases the fine for violations of the weather modification ban from $10,000 to $100,000, so they know that we mean business, and provides that all funds collected from these fines will be deposited in the Air Pollution Control Trust Fund.
She mentioned the Department of Environmental Protection online, by phone, mail, or email. That's also fantastic news, because I take a lot of videos of chemtrails all the time. If they break the law, I may be one of the first to utilize this. This is highly important to our health and our planet, and these criminals will no longer get away with it.
The amendment also requires the Department of Environmental Protection to establish a dedicated email, telephone line, online form to allow people to report suspected weather modification activities. The amendment provides that DEP may refer such reports to the Department of Health or the Division of Emergency Management wherever they deem appropriate.
One of the senators asked what chemicals are they using for cloud seeding.
What kind of chemicals that they use for cloud seeding, and do we have any data on its effect on humans?
She starts off with saying citizens are complaining of cloud seeding, most importantly chemtrails.
So there are many. The concerns are there, the complaints are there. I think that all of us senators at any given moment have received complaints with regards to the kinds of cloud seeding. Usually it comes coined with the term of, I think these are chemtrails, I'm very concerned.
He brings her back the topic of what chemicals are used and understands in the analysis, but he also gets into if they haven't seen applications and permits for this. If it's possible, we can't detect where it's coming from because the federal government is authorizing it.
So, is there any data that you can point to me or get me information on some of the chemicals that are used and its effect on humans if it's out there? I know that some of it is in the analysis, but I'm sure that's not all encompassing. The question I have is, like, if we haven't seen anything with the state level, like making any applications, is it possibly going on where we're not able to detect it because the federal government is authorizing this?
She says there isn't a lot of regulation on this, with huge loopholes and lack of transparency.
There isn't a lot of regulation on this. On the contrary, it's a huge loophole, and then there's a total lack of, I found, transparency and tracking with regards to this issue.
She says during the Biden administration, they mandated research for solar radiation, and she couldn't find any regulation.
In 2023, the previous administration had started working on different projects mandating research and initial governance framework regarding solar radiation, but I didn't see a lot of structure and or any kind of regulation that the states can marry to the feds.
Then she mentions the concerns of citizens again and mentions some would call it conspiracy theories.
The concerns are there. Some would call it concerns. Others would call it conspiracy theories. But I thought that perhaps this bill would allow us to start somewhere where we can start to separate fact from fiction by delegating and creating a system whereas people with concerns.
She says we don't have a lot of regulations when it comes to airspace.
We don't have a lot of regulations regarding airspace. We place a huge amount of emphasis on water quality control, and I think we should do the same with our air quality.
She's obviously been listening to the concerned citizens, we the people, and she explains it exactly how we see it with our very own eyes.
There have been concerns, and I'm consistently getting complaints from the central part of Florida with regards to strange activity, aircrafts. The terms that they use are dispersing chemicals that create condensation that they feel make their skies grayer. They aren't as blue as they should be. Some would say, oh, these are nothing but conspiracy theories. Well, they're concerns.
Then she explains how they are just now starting to investigate this weather modification, and she's enhancing a law that's already been applied to 32 other states.
And they obviously haven't been investigated. They just began to investigate them. And what I found very interesting in my research is just recently, even an entity like NOAA is one of the entities that are saying, listen, this is something that we need to take a closer look at, and not just anybody should be up there playing Raiders of the Lost Ark, deciding what they should or what they shouldn't be putting in our atmosphere. A lot of them with the concerns about too much sun, solar radiation, others with the concerns of weather modification. And so I thought it would just be best to enhance a law that's already been applied in 32 other states by adding the component of the Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Health with their scientific research, and EMS in order to mitigate any concerns.
Senator asked about cloud seeding and his confusion on if that is a real thing, and was surprised and shocked to see it in current statute, and coming to realize this is an actual thing. You mean we aren't conspiracy theorists after all?
The question I have is, and look, I'll be honest with you, when people start talking about cloud seeding and stuff, I start is that really a thing? And I was absolutely surprised to see it in current statute. I was actually shocked. And after reading it, I was like, okay, this is actually a thing.
Then he asked how cloud seeding started in Florida. Did it have to do with global warming or ag purpose?
How did it originally get into Florida statute? When, how, was it, was the original reasoning, did it have to do with weather modification for the purposes of global warming? Or did it have to do with an ag purpose? Like, how did it get in there?
So then she explains it did start with agriculture from climate change issues and climate intervention.
So my understanding is it started with ag. It started with agriculture. And it's been around for quite some time. If you Google it, there's a lot of information out there. I don't think that they had paid much attention to it. I think it had been just recent where it started coming up on both sides of the aisle, the political aisle, with regards to the climate change issue, and then those that were coming out and doing what they call climate intervention.
She says this has a grave impact concerning environmental, public safety, ethical considerations, lack of oversight, and public trust, because if we show concern, we are going to be called conspiracy theorists.
And there are grave concerns with regards to any type of weather or solar modification. There's environmental impact, public safety, ethical considerations, lack of oversight. I see a huge lack of oversight. And then, public trust as a whole, for us to be able to have a conversation and say, well, my concerns are, versus being afraid to question and ask because you're going to be called a conspiracy theorist.
She explains she would like the bill to close the loophole and begin to track the complaints and concerns.
I would really like the bill to just close the loophole, create a mechanism where we can begin to track the complaints, the concerns, put it through the system so that it can be vetted scientifically, and if need be, also have it mitigated.
Another senator chimes in and asks, what is the actual problem and risk that we are trying to solve with this bill?
What problem are we trying to solve with your bill? Is the problem that we believe that there is a public safety risk from any cloud seeding that's happening? I think I heard you say before also that the cloud seeding is not currently happening, or we don't think it's happening. Could you address that question of the problem we're trying to solve and the implied risk? I think there's an implied risk that we're trying to protect people from. What is that risk?
And she mentions we haven't seen a cloud seeding permit in over 10 years, and then again reiterates the concerns and mentions of chemtrails and how we are dubbed conspiracy theorists.
We haven't seen a request for a cloud seeding permit in over 10 years. Yet, many will complain, a lot of our constituents have, that there's activity going on. Aircrafts flying by with some type of condensation. And let's call a spade, chemtrails. That's the term that the conspiracy theorists are coined with.
She talks about the health risk complaints from the public being public health, respiratory issues, allergies, water and soil contamination, harming wildlife, and how we need transparency.
But think about what the concerns are. Health risks. There are worries about potential negative impacts on public health, including respiratory issues. I get a lot of those complaints. Also allergies. Environmental impact, concerns regarding possible soil and water contamination, harming wildlife and disruption of ecosystems. Government transparency as a whole. Government efficiency. It's in question and it's in play all the time. That's what we do up here. Calls for clear communication about what substances are being released in the atmosphere and their implications. Distrust in authorities as a whole, skepticism towards government and scientific institutions, fueled by perceived failures in handling environmental issues, and misinformation, blurring the line between legitimacy, inquiring and conspiracy theories. I just was really hoping to take this bill in a direction where we can all come together and just, sort of focus on the concerns and then work towards resiliency and make sure that we are covering what I consider to be, after the research, a huge loophole in our airspace and concerns over just air quality as a whole.
The senator asks if there have been any studies or data on these risks.
I'm curious, has the state sponsored any kind of study to try to identify those issues in advance, identify what those risks are, so that we as lawmakers and as senators can pass laws to respond to the research and any study and any data points that can be provided to us first?
She replies with, of course, no, we have not. But we should start to do that, because they are about to receive a huge amount of calls and emails from us concerned citizens. I just love her.
No, we have not, and that is a great point that you made today in our conversation, and I really appreciate that. We definitely should do that, and I think that this is a good place to start. Once we start to see the huge amount of calls that you're going to receive and the huge amount of emails that DEP is about to receive, I think that we can start to track it. We can start to address the concerns. And as was suggested, we can take it into a scientific area within the Department of Health, and if need be, mitigated via the Department of Emergency Management Systems.
Another senator asks about the sinister sound of geoengineering.
How do you distinguish between exhaust from a plane that leaves behind, I guess that's what people call chemtrails, versus something that is, sounds like in a sinister way, geoengineered?
And Garcia then shows it's real and the Biden administration was working on it, and says the scientists will show us the difference between condensation and chemtrails.
In the case of geoengineering is something that is very real. The previous administration was working on it. It's married to solar modification. The specifics as to delineating what's the difference between condensation and chemtrails, I think is going to be left up to our scientists in the Department of Health. This bill comes with teeth, hopefully, whereas concerned constituents can call our Department of Environmental Protection, which is supposed to be the experts on this, and they can delineate fact from fiction, and then we can walk it through the process.
The senator asked her to explain the roles in the Department of Health and DEP.
You're kind of going back and forth between the Department of Health and DEP. Can you explain what role each play in this?
Garcia says the DEP will take the complaints from citizens, the quality of the air being more foggy, people are having symptoms, then it's given to the Department of Health. The scientists can vet the complaints, test the air, then they can ask the EMS to step in and mitigate it.
Department of Environmental Protection takes in the complaints, vets it, depending on the concern. Let's say people are complaining about the quality of the air. They're complaining that it's foggier than usual. They're having some type of symptoms. It's given to the Department of Health, where they have, my understanding, a group of scientists that can go out and vet the complaint, test the air quality, and depending on the feedback, then we would ask EMS to step in to mitigate if necessary.
The senator understands there is going to be a lot of calls about this and asks how they are going to manage all these calls, which is quite comical.
We really expect the DEP to take in calls about people complaining about general air quality, whether it's pollution, fog, fire burning, and they're supposed to be able to handle all these calls?
And Garcia basically says, yep, that's their job.
That's what they're there for. We do it with water quality. So I would imagine that their expertise would decide, what is a valid complaint versus just someone whining.
The senator says with this massive volume of potential calls, how will they be able to handle it? Are they going to have to hire more people?
Since you've mentioned that you've been getting a lot of calls in your office, you can only imagine what might come down the pike if this bill were to pass. How will DEP handle the volume? Do you anticipate hiring more? Is there an appropriation associated with this bill?
Garcia says she will ask them.
I will ask the Department of Environmental Protection how they are going to do so.
Then she asks if Garcia has spoken to them prior to this and if they're on board with this plan. She sounds a little scared.
Have you spoken with them prior to this? Are they on board with this plan?
And Garcia replies that her office has been in contact with them.
Slightly, not through me, through our committee staff. We were looking for the different options of where we could land this concern and these complaints. And we thought that there would be no better department than the Department of Environmental Protection that also monitors other such concerns, such as water quality, et cetera.
Then the senator asks if the bill will ban research into weather that we need. And Garcia metaphorically slaps her in the face with, no, this will help research to get more information and not supervising people who want to destroy our state with weather modification.
Does the bill ban any kind of research or experimentation in the field of weather that we all know we might need some help with the weather events that have been hitting our state?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, not at all. I think it actually welcomes that. I think that we need, as a matter of fact, more research and more information rather than just not supervising people that want to take it upon themselves to intervene with regards to any type of changes in climate.
This is even funnier. She then asked Garcia about Trump saying that he wanted to shoot a nuclear bomb into a hurricane.
Final question. So in President Trump's first term, he mentioned, is there a possibility of shooting a nuclear bomb into a hurricane? Would that be illegal under this bill?
You can hear the chairwoman laughing at that. And then Garcia says, well, what do you think?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What do you think?
I'm asking you. You want
No,
this bill?
any kind of anything that intrudes, modifies, disrupts our weather, our air quality, or just the solar radiation in any way, shape, or form is obviously prohibited under this bill.
She asked Garcia how we are going to handle the government doing something good or bad.
Final follow-up, sorry. That brings me to the last question is, what if the federal government is doing something that hopefully would be helpful to our weather system, or maybe it's not, but the federal government is doing it? How is the state of Florida going to handle that?
And she replies back with, they just don't have enough information or research to start playing with Mother Nature.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The way they always have, fighting with each other. No, they actually have. They actually have. They did begin research, very incomplete research, by the way, but they did start working on an initiative to have a better look at the concerns about modifying solar radiation and weather modification as a whole. And once again, you would be surprised, an entity such as NOAA, there are several articles out there, just Google it, are very concerned that we just, don't have enough information. We just don't have enough research to start playing with Mother Nature.
Then Garcia slams the Democrats for using weather modification as a tool for climate change. And you can hear her laughing in the microphone from the other senator. She must be a Democrat. They always laugh when they get called out.
While weather modification is often discussed as a potential tool to address climate change, which I know is very important to the Democrats, it is not a viable solution for several reasons. And I've been researching this on both sides.
Now here are the best parts with the experts and citizens. This first one explains what the chemicals are in the chemtrails, which we already knew, but it's great that they're actually putting this in this bill in this meeting.
I'm Jackie Jordan. I've been a professional in the media for a very, very long time. And I'm here also on behalf of Global Wellness Forum, which is here. Real quickly, to answer the questions, it's aluminum, barium, and silver iodide is the primary chemicals that are used.
She explains the difference between contrails and chemtrails, which is exactly what I mentioned in my previous videos and showed the difference on video as evidence.
For contrails, there's difference between contrails and chemtrails, which, the forbidden C words, is contrail is condensation. So when you watch an airplane go by, we typically see the condensation trail will follow in proportion to the plane's movement. With a chemtrail, it actually leaves an entire stain across the entire skyscape.
This next expert tells the senators to close their eyes and imagine what the skies looked like when they were children and how different it is now compared to back then, which is a really great point.
My name is Amy Villela McBride. I'm a constituent in Sarasota of Senator Joe Gruder's, and I'm also here on behalf of the Global Wellness Forum, where I serve as the executive director. We are a coalition of hundreds of grassroots organizations focused on health and wellness.
And she actually mentions the same documentary that I urge people to watch on YouTube called The Dimming, where they took samples of the sky after chemtrails.
So I'd like to ask all of you, just indulge me for a second, if you could. Just close your eyes and think back to a time in your childhood when you were outside and playing. And in your mind's vision right now, try to imagine what those skies looked like. They were probably blue with white fluffy clouds. That is not the clouds that we're seeing today. There are thousands and thousands of Floridians that have taken notice to the strange cloud formations that are happening all over our skies here in Florida. And in fact, in just this past week, our partners at Stand for Health Freedom launched an action alert specifically to support this bill, and we've already had over 18,000 signatures in under 1 week. This issue is very important to many, many Floridians.
Then she also says what the chemicals are in the chemtrails and the health effects.
Air and water samples have been taken in various parts of our state and also across the country. There's an amazing documentary film that I would encourage you all to watch called The Dimming, which shows the NOAA aircraft and how they take these samples. And there's huge reason for concern. There's much scientific evidence if you're to watch that film.
The very confused senator asked how these chemicals are getting into the clouds, and she explains it is through aircraft. You really can't make up the level of stupidity here.
But essentially what we're collecting with those air samples and able to see is many heavy metals, so aluminum, strontium, barium, other particulate matters that are all toxic to our health. So there are severe negative health effects, specifically when it comes to neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's, dementia, and more.
And she follows up and asks who is they that are doing this? And the point of the bill is to track it and find out.
I'm just truly confused. How are these chemicals getting into the clouds? Is it aircraft? Is it too many planes? Or like, it sounds like there's the way the bill was described, it's like there's somebody shooting stuff into the atmosphere to try to change our weather, but that's not what you're talking about. You're just saying that how did those chemicals get there?
It's solar radiation management, so this is a form that they use to actually try to dim the sun. Again, I would encourage you to watch this documentary film. You would see a lot, but it is coming through aircraft.
And she asks what type of planes these are, and she replies with them being contracted flights.
May I go
You're
back?
recognized.
When you say they are doing solar dimming, if that was the language you used, who is they and what are they doing?
Well, I think that's the importance of this bill, so we can start to track it and have transparency to find out who exactly that is. Is it state-level contractors? Is it federal-level contractors? I don't think we actually know that. And I think that's the point Senator Garcia has made, that we're not seeing the permits put forth for this. So this bill will help us create that transparency and accountability that we need to better track this and have that understanding.
She cluelessly asks who would want solar dimming and says it's those that want climate control.
Are you saying that regular passenger aircraft are causing this? So
Typically
I still don't understand how this is being done.
They're typically contracted flights.
So who would want solar dimming?
There's, some groups that feel that this is important for the environment, and they see it as a form of climate control or climate intervention.
And then a citizen comes forward and he explains he's been seeing chemtrails for over 6 to 10 years, and then they form a haze or a cloud.
My name is Greg Deal. I'm a concerned Florida citizen. I'm here in support of SB 56. I've been personally witnessing weather modification, cloud seeding, or chemtrails as we call it now, over the past 6 years. I travel the state of Florida for work, and I've been noticing over the last 6 to 10 years now these unusual trails and streaks in the sky being left behind by planes. At first, I thought they were contrail condensation coming out of the backs of planes at high altitudes, but as I quickly realized these trails would not dissipate and actually form a haze or a cloud.
Then he goes on to seeing the chemtrails before hurricanes. Imagine that. And also mentions the Dimming movie.
We've seen chemtrails significantly being sprayed prior to the last 2 hurricanes. A day prior to Hurricane Helene, I was in Sarasota. They were spraying chemtrails nonstop in the sky. Again, in Orlando, prior to Milton, the skies were full of chemtrails. I started documenting these trails with videos and photos. I started with more research and started to find out that cloud seeding and geoengineering have been around for quite a while. There are patents going back into the early 1900s. I also came across the video that was just recently discussed, the dimming from Geoengineering Watch, which is actually a fantastic video to watch.
He speaks about an article about Bill Gates wanting to block the sun.
I started running across news articles, one specifically from Forbes in 2021, with the headline, "A Bill Gates venture aims to spray dust into the atmosphere to block the sun. What could go wrong?" The article states that this Microsoft billionaire founder, Bill Gates, is financially backing the development of sun dimming technology that would potentially reflect sun out of the Earth's atmosphere, triggering a global cooling effect.
And how he's seen on a TV show that they spoke about the negative effects of chemtrails.
In 2011, Prince was on the Travis Smiley national TV show talking about chemtrails and the negative effects on the community.
He mentions Kennedy Jr. wanting to end chemtrails.
RFK Jr. has even recently said that he wants to end the practice of chemtrails.
And he also goes into what chemicals are coming out of these planes to form the chemtrails.
My question is, why are we trying to control the weather? What are they spraying out of the backs of these planes that leave these massive trails? I was able to find out that what is being sprayed is silver iodide that creates more precipitation, potassium iodide, solid carbon dioxide, aluminum, and barium. Aluminum is one of the main metals found in Alzheimer's patients. How does spraying all these type of chemicals and metals in our atmosphere affect our water supply, our crops, our animals, our rivers and streams, and most importantly, all of us? All this in the hope of controlling our weather and dimming the sun in the name of global climate change.
Now here's the senators who voted no, and yes, the no's are not shocking. This guy doesn't seem to use his own eyes and ears, so he's a no.
I'm going to have to vote no on this bill for now because I don't think it's in the right posture to move forward. Thank you.
This guy totally gets it.
And so I'm up on the bill to make sure that if it is good for me that I have strontium aerosolized in my lungs, somebody will come tell me that we need to protect the ability to still do this. Until then, let's not do it. So I'm up on it.
Thank you.
Here's this woman again who doesn't want to harm her own children, but is also deaf and blind.
I feel like this is not ready for prime time. I do not sit here today and say I want chemicals in our atmosphere. Of course not. I have children too. But I don't think this is the right vehicle. So nobody wants these kinds of dangers in our atmosphere, but this bill is not ready to manage it. And so based on our responsibilities, our fiduciary responsibilities, and the way we have to be very careful with how we set up laws, basically this bill is just an enforcement mechanism in quite a large sum when it doesn't seem that there's a very easy way to investigate it. And I'd be concerned about a lot of phone calls and a lot of accusations, and I haven't heard one person say who is at fault here, who's the bad actor, what's happening. It's just too unknown to legislate upon right now. For that reason, I'm a no.
I like this guy the best in how he articulates common frickin' sense.
Obviously, you cannot modify weather without chemicals, right? So obviously there are being chemicals used, and if there are heavy metals being used, which is the assertion, is that obviously can have disastrous effects on humans. That's sort of been documented. The federal government is involved. It's not like the federal government ever told us something that wasn't accurate before. Telling us things that were good for us when it wasn't good for us. I mean, we can look back just a couple of years with COVID and the shots and stuff like that. So I would rather err on the side of caution, along with what Senator Broder said. It's like, let's just forbid the practice. It's in statute right now. It does nothing to take that out of statute for us, because I just have a feeling that, somewhere down the road, and whether that down the road is 1 year, 5 years, or 20 years down the road, we're going to find out that some of the chemicals that they were using for this was harmful to us. And we're going to look back at this time and say, it's probably thankful that we stopped the practice, or at least attempted to stop the practice in Florida. So I'm with you. I am a yes, and I'd like to see it continue going forward.
Now with Garcia's closing statement, she explains how research and information was on the Biden admin's whitehouse.gov and by the World Economic Forum. Shocker, I know.
And Senator Smith, respectfully, when I said, Google it, I didn't mean it in a disparaging form. You'd be surprised if you go in and you do some research. In particular, you can go to the whitehouse.gov from the previous administration, was able to provide some very interesting information. World Economic Forum was also very, very involved and has been very involved in weather modification.
Lastly, she explains why this is needed.
This is a firm and necessary standard, safeguard against unregulated weather modification and geoengineering activities within our state. It has been happening. By expanding the scope of prohibited activities and strengthening enforcement measures, we are ensuring that Florida's air, water, and climate remain free from unauthorized manipulation. This bill not only increases penalties to deter unlawful actions, but also establishes clear reporting mechanisms for public accountability, with fines of up to $100,000 per violation and dedicated funding for air pollution control. We are sending a strong message, health, safety, environmental integrity to our communities, which personally I think is non-negotiable. By supporting SB 56, we reaffirm Florida's commitment to responsible environmental stewardship and public transparency. And I ask all of you for your favorable support. Thank you very much.
Senator Arrington?
No.
Senator Avila?
Yes.
Senator Broder?
Yes.
Senator DeSigli? Yes. Senator Harrell? Yes. Senator Polsky? No. Senator Smith?
No.
Vice Chair Angolia? Yes. Chair Rodriguez?
Yes, and by your vote, CS for SB 56 is reported favorably.
So the senators that voted no on this should be ashamed of themselves and probably have more of the I need to cover this up syndrome. They definitely need to be voted out of office.